Kim Tae-ho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he worked under the belly of the massive Valdori warship. The metal was hot from the ship's engines, and the smell of burning oil filled his nose. Around him, dozens of other humans crawled through the tight spaces, fixing pipes and wires that the alien masters could not reach with their large bodies. The Valdori were tall creatures, almost 3 meters high, with thick scales that looked like green metal. Crystal pieces grew from their heads and backs, glowing with a soft blue light. These crystals let them read minds and move things without touching them. At least, that was what they could do to humans. Tae-ho had never seen a Valdori use these. "Powers on another Valdori. Move faster, servants," barked Commander Velthar from above. His voice was like grinding stone. "The High Regent wants this ship ready by tomorrow." Tae-ho said nothing. None of the humans said anything. They had learned, long ago, that talking back meant punishment or worse. Instead, he focused on the work. The power cable in his hands was damaged, but not in the way the Valdori thought. Someone had cut it very carefully to make it look like normal wear. Tae-ho smiled to himself as he fixed it properly. This was not the first time he had found such damage. Over the past months, more and more equipment had been failing in ways that seemed like accidents. The Valdori never suspected anything. To them, humans were just smart animals, good for fixing things but too simple to cause real trouble. Tae-ho finished his work and crawled out from under the ship. He looked up at the massive vessel and felt a mixture of hate and admiration. The Yao. Valdori built beautiful machines, but they used them for ugly purposes. This ship would carry soldiers to another world where humans lived as slaves, just like on Earth. Tae-ho. The voice made him jump. Park So-min stood beside him carrying her medical bag. She was one of the few humans allowed to move freely around the station because she treated injuries for both humans and Valdori. "You look tired," she said quietly. "The work is hard today," he replied, which was their code for saying the Valdori were watching closely. So-min nodded and moved on, but not before brushing against his hand. In that brief touch, she passed him a small piece of folded paper. Tae-ho slipped it into his pocket without looking. The workday ended when the station's artificial sun dimmed to simulate night. The humans walked in groups to their living areas, tired and silent. Their quarters were clean but small, more like prison cells than homes. Each person had a bed, a small table, and a storage box for their few belongings. Tae-ho waited until the lights went out before reading So-min's message. It was written in a code that looked like maintenance notes, but he had learned to read the hidden meaning years ago. The message was short but important. "Old friend wants to see you. Same place as before." He burned the paper with his small heating unit and lay back on his bed. The old friend was Lee Dong-wook, a man who had been alive when humans were still free. Most humans born under Valdori rule thought freedom was just a story, but Dong-wook remembered when humans had their own cities, their own ships, their own choices. The next day, Tae-ho found an excuse to visit the lower levels of the station. He told his supervisor he needed special parts from storage, which was partly true. The storage areas were dark and full of old equipment that no one used anymore, perfect for secret meetings. Dong-wook was waiting for him, along with 2 other humans Tae-ho did not recognize. The old man looked smaller each time Tae-ho saw him, but his eyes were still bright and angry. "The time is coming closer," Dong-wook said without greeting. "Are you ready to do more than just fix their machines?" Tae-ho had been expecting this question for months. "What do you mean?" One of the strangers, a woman with short black hair, stepped forward. "We mean it is time to stop pretending to be good servants. Time to fight back." "Fight back?" Tae-ho almost laughed. "With what? They have weapons that can destroy planets. They can read our minds. They are stronger and faster than us." "Are they?" Dong-wook asked. "You work on their ships every day. You know their machines better than they do. Tell me, have you ever seen a Valdori fix anything himself?" Tae-ho thought about it. The truth was, he had never seen a Valdori do any real work. They gave orders and used their mind powers, but they always needed humans to actually build and repair things. "They think we are stupid," the woman continued. They teach us just enough to do our jobs, but not enough to be dangerous. They never imagined we might learn more on our own. She pulled out a small device that looked like a broken tool. This little machine can block their mind reading for a few minutes. We made it from parts they threw away. Dongwook leaned forward. For 200 years we have been watching them, learning from them. Every human who works in their factories, every servant in their houses, every repair worker on their ships has been gathering information. We know their weaknesses because they never bothered to hide them from us. The second stranger, a young man about Taeho's age, spoke for the first time. My sister works in the medical center. She has been studying Valdori bodies when she treats their injuries. There are things about them they do not want us to know. Taeho felt his heart beating faster. What kind of things? The crystals that give them their powers. So Min's voice came from the shadows. She stepped into the light, making Taeho jump again. They are not really part of their bodies. They are separate creatures that live inside them. And separate creatures can be removed. Dongwook smiled, but it was not a happy smile. We have been patient for so long, pretending to be the simple servants they think we are. But patience has limits. Yesterday, they took another group of children for their experiments. 50 young humans who will never see their families again. Taeho's blood turned cold. His younger sister had been selected for genetic optimization just last month. The Valdori said it was an honor, that she would be improved and made more useful. But no human who went for optimization ever came back the same. Most never came back at all. What do you want from me? He asked. You know their ships better than anyone, the woman said. We need you to help us understand how to make them stop working. Not just break down for a few hours, but really stop working. And then what? Even if we could destroy some ships, they have thousands more. Dongwook's eyes grew bright with something that might have been madness, or might have been hope. Then we show them that their servants are not as harmless as they thought. We show them that humans can bite back. The meeting ended with Taeho agreeing to think about their proposal. As he walked back to his quarters, his mind was spinning with new possibilities. All his life he had accepted that humans were weak and the Valdori were strong. But what if that was only true because humans had chosen to be weak? That night he lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about his sister. Somewhere on this station, she was probably crying for her family, scared and alone. The Valdori would change her body and her mind until she was no longer really human. They called it improvement, but Taeho knew it was murder. By morning, his decision was made. If the Valdori wanted servants, they would get servants. But servants who remembered how to hate and who had been learning their master's secrets for 200 years. The rebellion was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since Taeho joined the secret group. Each day he worked on Valdori ships as usual, but now he paid attention to different things. Instead of just fixing problems, he studied how the machines worked together. He looked for weak spots that could cause the most damage. The group met every few days in different places around the station. Taeho learned that there were many more rebels than he had imagined. Choi Jine worked in the data center, pretending to be a simple clerk who organized files. In reality, she was one of the smartest humans on the station, with a mind that could solve problems the Valdori computers could not handle. Look at this, Jine said during one meeting, showing them a small metal device. I built it from spare parts in the electronics recycling center. When we turn it on near a Valdori, their crystal implants stop working for about 10 minutes. Taeho picked up the device. It was no bigger than his thumb and looked like junk. How does it work? The crystals in their heads talk to each other, using a special frequency like a radio signal, Jine explained. This device makes noise on that same frequency, so they cannot hear each other. Without that connection, they lose their mind powers. So Min leaned forward with interest. I have been studying their medical files when I treat injured Valdori. The crystals are not just for mind reading, they also help control their emotions and memory. When the crystals stop working, they become confused and frightened. Another rebel, Yoon Hyun-sik, had been a personal guard for a Valdori noble before joining the resistance. He was bigger than most humans, and had learned to fight by watching his former master's soldiers. Fear is good, Hyunsik said. Scared enemies make mistakes. But we need more than just confusion. We need weapons that can actually hurt them. Jin'ei smiled and pulled out another device. This one was larger and had sharp metal points sticking out of it. I call this a neural disruptor. When you stick it into a Valdori's crystal, it does not just block their powers. It causes terrible pain and can destroy the crystal permanently. Taeho stared at the weapon. It was cruel, designed to cause suffering. Part of him felt sick at the thought of using it. But then he remembered his sister's face when the Valdori took her away, and the sick feeling changed to anger. The group's leader was now Nam Hyejin, a woman who had taken over after Dong-wook. Died in an accident. At least the Valdori thought it was an accident. In truth, the old man had sacrificed himself to destroy an important computer system, erasing evidence that might have exposed the entire resistance. We have people in every part of their operation, Hyejin explained to Taeho during his first official briefing. Humans who clean their buildings know where they keep their weapons. Humans who cook their food know when they have important meetings. Humans who maintain their computers have access to their secret communications. She showed him a map of the station with red dots, marking the locations of resistance members. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all pretending to be loyal servants while secretly working to bring down their masters. The Valdori think they are clever, Hyejin continued. They separated human families and mixed different cultures together, so we could not organize against them. But they made one mistake. They taught us their language so we could serve them better. Now we can talk to each other no matter where we came from. Taeho learned that the resistance had been growing for decades, passed down from parents to children in whispered conversations and hidden lessons. Each generation became more skilled at pretending to be simple, while actually becoming more dangerous. The first real test came when a group of Valdori soldiers decided to have some fun with human workers. They used their mind powers to make 3 humans dance like puppets just for entertainment. The humans could not resist or fight back, forced to move however the Valdori wanted while the aliens laughed. So Min was nearby when it happened. She activated one of Jin'ei's signal blockers, and suddenly the 3 humans collapsed as the mind control stopped working. The Valdori looked confused, then angry. They assumed their crystals were malfunctioning and called for technical support. While Valdori engineers tried to figure out what was wrong with their equipment, the resistance struck back. Hyunsik had taught several humans how to move quietly and attack quickly. They slipped into the Valdori quarters that night and used neural disruptors on 2 of the soldiers who had humiliated their friends. The aliens woke up screaming. Their crystals were destroyed, leaving them blind to the psychic network that connected all Valdori. They stumbled around their room, confused and terrified, no longer able to sense the thoughts and emotions of others. Commander Velthar investigated the incident but found no evidence of human involvement. The Valdori could not imagine that their servants were capable of such precise attacks. They blamed the injuries on a technical malfunction and increased security around their equipment, instead of watching the humans more carefully. This was exactly what the resistance wanted. While the Valdori focused on protecting their machines, they ignored the real threat walking among them every day. Over the following weeks, more small incidents occurred. Important data files became corrupted. Weapon systems developed mysterious problems. Food supplies spoiled faster than they should. Each problem alone seemed like bad luck or equipment failure, but together they began to slow down the entire operation. Taeho's job became more complicated as he started sabotaging the ships he was supposed to fix. Instead of repairing damage completely, he would leave tiny flaws that would cause bigger problems later. A loose connection here, a worn part not quite replaced there. The ships would work fine for a few days, then break down at the worst possible moments. The beauty is in the timing, Jin'ei explained during one of their meetings. We do not want them to know we are fighting back yet. We want them to think they are just having bad luck, so Min had made another important discovery while treating Valdori patients. Their crystals need a special chemical to stay healthy, she reported. It comes from their home planet and gets delivered in their medical supplies. If we could contaminate those supplies, Their crystals would slowly weaken and die, Jin'ei finished. They would lose their powers gradually, thinking it was just illness. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. They would need to break into the medical storage area, replace the crystal nutrient with a poison that looked identical, and escape without being detected. If they were caught, the entire resistance would be exposed. But the risk was worth it. There were over 300 Valdori on the station. If they could weaken or destroy their crystals, the balance of power would shift dramatically. Taeho volunteered for the mission, along with So Min and 2 other rebels. They spent days studying the medical center's schedule, learning when guards changed shifts and which areas had the least surveillance. The night of the operation, everything went wrong. A Valdori patrol decided to check the medical center just as the humans were breaking in. So Min barely had time to hide before 2 soldiers walked through the storage area. But instead of reporting the humans, one of the soldiers stopped and spoke quietly in the human language. "We know you are here. Come out slowly." Taeho's heart nearly stopped. They had been discovered, and now the entire resistance would be destroyed. But then the soldier continued speaking, and his words changed everything. "My name is Kethan. I am not your enemy. There are some among my people who do not agree with how humans are treated." Slowly, the 4 humans emerged from their hiding places. The Valdori soldier was smaller than most, with crystals that glowed dimmer than usual. His companion looked nervous, but not hostile. "You want to poison the crystal nutrients?" Kethan said. It was not a question. "We will help you, but in return, you must promise that not all Valdori will suffer for the crimes of our leaders." Taeho stared at the alien in shock. "Why would you help us?" "Because some of us remember what our empire was like before we became conquerors," Kethan replied. "We were explorers once, seeking knowledge and friendship with other species. The path we have chosen leads only to darkness. With help from the Valdori rebels, the mission succeeded perfectly. The crystal nutrients were replaced with a slow-acting poison that would take weeks to show its effects. By the time the Valdori leadership realized what was happening, it would be too late to stop it. As they parted ways that night, Kethan gave them one final piece of information. A fleet is coming from the core worlds, 50 ships carrying thousands of soldiers. They plan to expand the slave operation to 10 more human worlds. The resistance now faced a terrible choice. They could continue their slow sabotage and hope to weaken the station's defenses before the fleet arrived. Or they could reveal themselves and try to capture the station quickly, before reinforcements could stop them. Hyejin made the decision, for all of them. "We have been patient for 200 years, she announced to the assembled rebels. But patience ends now. It is time to show them what their servants can really do." The secret war was about to become an open rebellion. The rebellion began at exactly midnight station time. All across the massive orbital platform, humans who had pretended to be simple servants for their entire lives suddenly revealed what they had really become. Taeho led a team of maintenance workers to the main power station. They moved through service tunnels that the Valdori had forgotten existed, carrying weapons built from industrial tools. Song Yujin had taught them how to turn plasma welders into portable cannons and construction mechs into walking tanks. "Remember," Taeho whispered to his team as they reached the power station entrance, "we do not want to destroy everything. We want to capture it so we can use it ourselves." The Valdori guards at the power station were not expecting trouble. They had grown lazy after 2 centuries of ruling over peaceful servants. When Jin'ei's signal blockers activated, cutting off their crystal powers, the aliens panicked. They had never learned to fight without their psychic abilities. Hyunsik's combat training proved its worth as human fighters moved with deadly precision. They struck at weak points in Valdori armor that no one was supposed to know about. They used tactics that seemed random and chaotic but actually followed careful plans. Within an hour, the rebels controlled 3 major sections of the station. But their victory came at a cost. Commander Velthar had managed to send a distress signal before the communications center was captured. Valdori reinforcements would arrive soon. "Let them come," said Kang Min-ho, the tactical genius who had taken charge of military operations. We know this station better than they do. Every pipe, every wire, every hidden passage. This is our home and we will defend it. Minho had spent years studying Valdori military tactics by watching their training exercises and reading their strategic manuals. He discovered that the aliens fought in predictable patterns, always using the same formations and responses. They were disciplined, but not creative. The first Valdori counterattack came at dawn. 2 full companies of elite soldiers moved through the main corridors, expecting to crush the human uprising with overwhelming force. Instead, they walked into carefully prepared traps. Yu Jin had rigged the corridor walls with explosive charges, salvaged from mining equipment. When the soldiers reached the middle of the passage, the charges detonated. Not to kill, but to bring down the ceiling and separate the alien forces into smaller, weaker groups. Then the real fight began. Humans emerged from side passages and maintenance shafts, attacking from directions the Valdori had not considered. They used the station's own systems as weapons, flooding some areas with steam from broken pipes while filling others with toxic gases from the chemical plants. Lim Jae-sung, who had once entertained Valdori nobles with music and comedy, now used his skills for psychological warfare. He hacked into the station's communication system and began broadcasting messages that struck at the aliens' deepest fears. "You cannot hide from us." His voice echoed through every speaker on the station. "We know where you sleep, we know what you fear. We have been watching you for 200 years and now we are done being your servants." The psychological attacks worked better than anyone had hoped. Valdori soldiers began to doubt their own allies, wondering which of their servants might be secret rebels. Some refused to eat food prepared by humans. Others demanded constant bodyguards even in areas that should have been completely safe. But the humans' greatest advantage was their willingness to adapt and improvise. When the Valdori set up defensive positions in the main plaza, the rebels simply avoided those areas and attacked through the waste disposal system instead. When alien forces tried to retake the power station, they found that the humans had rewired everything to create deadly electrical traps. So-min's medical knowledge became a weapon as she created specialized poisons designed to target Valdori biology. She also treated wounded humans with techniques learned from years of studying alien anatomy. Her field hospitals saved lives and kept fighters in the battle longer than should have been possible. The turning point came when a group of Valdori tried to retake the docking bay where their ships were stored. They assumed the human mechanics would not know how to use the advanced alien technology against them. They were very wrong. Bae Sung-min had been working on Valdori ships for 15 years. He knew every system, every weakness, every hidden feature that the aliens had never bothered to explain to their simple servants. When the attack began, he activated emergency protocols that the Valdori had forgotten about. The docking bay's automated defense systems came online, but instead of protecting the ships, they began systematically destroying them. Plasma cannons that should have been firing at invaders turned on the vessels they were supposed to guard. Force fields designed to contain explosions trapped Valdori soldiers in killing zones. "How is this possible?" screamed a Valdori officer as his escape ship exploded on the launch pad. Sung-min smiled grimly from his hiding place in the control room. "You taught us to maintain your machines, but you never taught us to stop learning about them." By the end of the first week, the rebels controlled over half the station, but their supplies were running low and Valdori reinforcements were getting closer. The rebels had won the first battles, but the war was far from over. That was when Oh-ji-won revealed the scope of their real preparations. The communications specialist had been secretly coordinating with human resistance cells on 17 different worlds. The uprising on this station was not an isolated event. It was part of a massive, coordinated rebellion across multiple star systems. "Every world where humans are held as slaves is rising up today," Ji-won announced to the rebel leadership. "The Valdori Empire is fighting fires everywhere at once. They cannot send their full force against us because they need to protect their other holdings." The news spread quickly through the human population, carried by secret radio networks and hidden message systems. Morale soared as people realized they were not alone in their fight. The scattered servants of a vast empire had become a unified army. Quan Seok-jin led teams of demolition experts who had learned their skills from decades of mining and construction work. They began targeting Valdori supply lines, cutting off food and ammunition shipments to enemy-held areas of the station. Every explosion was carefully calculated to cause maximum disruption, while preserving systems that the humans would need later. The Valdori response became increasingly desperate. High Regent Morden ordered the execution of all human prisoners, hoping to terrify the rebels into surrender. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Humans who had been reluctant to fight now joined the rebellion with nothing left to lose. Commander. Velthar tried one last gambit, threatening to destroy the entire station rather than let it fall into human hands. But his own officers refused to follow the order. They had families on other worlds and knew that destroying this station would not stop the rebellion spreading across the galaxy. The final battle for the station began when Valdori reinforcements finally arrived, only to find that the humans had captured most of their ships and turned the station's defense systems against them. The rescue fleet walked into a trap that had been 2 centuries in the making. Taeho stood in the station's command center, looking at displays that showed human forces winning battles across a dozen star systems. The servants had become generals. The oppressed had become liberators, and the galaxy would never be the same. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The Valdori Empire was vast and powerful, with resources the humans could barely imagine. Winning their freedom would require more than tactical victories. It would require proving that humans could not just fight, but build something better than what they were destroying. So Min joined him at the observation window, watching as the last Valdori ships retreated from the station they had once commanded. "What happens now?" she asked. Taeho thought about his sister, probably somewhere in the vast galaxy, changed by alien experiments but maybe still alive. He thought about all the other humans still enslaved on distant worlds, waiting for liberation that might never come. "Now we show them that servants can become something more than masters," he said. "We show them that freedom is worth any price." The war for human liberty had begun in earnest. 6 months after the first rebellion, the war had spread to over 40 star systems. What began as scattered uprisings had become a coordinated campaign that threatened the very foundation of the Valdori Empire. General Kim Taeho, as he was now called, stood on the bridge of the captured dreadnought, Eternal Dominion. The massive warship had once been the pride of the Valdori fleet, commanded by High Admiral Zeftar himself. Now it served as the flagship of the Free Human Alliance, crewed entirely by former slaves who had learned to operate alien technology better than its creators. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from the Kepler Station Defense Fleet," reported Communications Officer Park So-min. Her medical training had made her invaluable in understanding Valdori physiology, but her quick mind and steady nerves had earned her a place on the command crew. Taeho studied the tactical display. 3 Valdori cruisers hung dead in space, their crews rendered helpless by the neural disruptor weapons that Jinne's engineers had perfected. The technology that once seemed like impossible science fiction was now standard equipment for human forces. "Accept their surrender," he ordered, "but keep the disruptors active until we have control of their ships." Admiral Bae Sung-min, commanding the human space fleet from his converted mining vessel, Iron Resolve, had revolutionized space combat by refusing to fight like the Valdori expected. Instead of massive ship-to-ship battles, he used fast raids and hit-and-run tactics that left enemy forces confused and demoralized. His latest victory had been particularly impressive. A Valdori supply convoy of 20 ships had been captured without firing a shot. Sung-min's raiders had simply attached signal jammers to the convoy's escort vessels, then sent false orders directing the entire fleet to a human-controlled system. By the time the Valdori realized their mistake, they were surrounded and helpless. "The beauty of fighting an empire," Sung-min had explained to his officers, "is that they are used to giving orders and having them followed. They never learned to question suspicious commands." But the war's most important victories were happening on planets throughout Valdori space. Resistance leader Oh Ji-won coordinated simultaneous uprisings on 17 worlds, each time to maximize the impact and stretch enemy forces beyond their limits. On New Sol, human miners used industrial equipment to break through Valdori fortresses that had stood unconquered for decades. On Terra Nova, agricultural workers poisoned the food supplies of their overseers, then disappeared into forests they knew better than any alien soldier. On Hanyang Colony, factory workers converted their assembly lines to produce weapons instead of consumer goods. Each victory brought new resources and new recruits. Humans who had lived their entire lives as slaves discovered they had skills their masters never imagined. Former servants became engineers, tacticians, pilots, and leaders of a revolution that grew stronger with each passing day. The Valdori Empire's response was swift but poorly coordinated. High Regent Moradin ordered massive fleets to crush the rebellions, but these forces arrived to find empty planets and abandoned facilities. The humans had learned to fight like ghosts, appearing where they were not expected and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. "Where are they?" demanded Commander Velthar during a strategy meeting on the Valdori homeworld. "We have tracked their ships to the Vega system, but when our fleets arrive, they find nothing but space dust and radiation signatures." The answer was simpler than the Valdori could have imagined. The humans were hiding in places the aliens had never thought to look, inside asteroid fields, within the rings of gas giants, even in the debris fields of ancient battles. Locations that seemed impossible to survive in were perfect refuges for people who had learned to make do with whatever they could find. Quan Seok Jin had become the master of impossible hideouts. His engineering teams converted hollow asteroids into secret bases complete with life support systems built from salvaged Valdori technology. These hidden facilities served as staging areas for raids and safe havens for human refugees fleeing Valdori reprisals. The psychological impact of the war was perhaps even greater than the military victories. Lim Jae-sung's propaganda broadcasts reached every corner of Valdori space, telling stories of human courage and alien defeat that inspired new rebellions wherever they were heard. "They called us servants." His voice rang out across the galaxy. "They said we were too weak to matter, too simple to understand, but every day their mighty empire grows smaller, while our alliance grows stronger. Who are the masters now?" The broadcasts had an unexpected effect on other species within the Valdori Empire. The Kalani, who had been conquered 50 years before humanity, began their own uprising. The crystalline Thektar, enslaved for over a century, started sabotaging the mining operations they were forced to run. For the first time in its history, the Valdori Empire faced rebellions from multiple species simultaneously. Their military forces, designed to fight external enemies, were not prepared for internal revolts that struck at the heart of their power structure. President Nam Hye-jin, elected leader of the Free Human Alliance, made a historic speech that was transmitted to every world in known space. "We do not fight for revenge," she declared. "We fight for the principle that no thinking being should be enslaved by another. Our victory will mean freedom not just for humanity, but for all species." That dream of choosing their own destiny, the political implications were staggering. The Valdori had built their empire on the belief that might made right, that superior technology and psychic powers gave them the natural authority to rule over lesser species. The human rebellion challenged that fundamental assumption and offered an alternative vision of galactic civilization. But the war's most dramatic moment came when human forces captured a Valdori breeding facility on the world of Proxima. The discovery of what the aliens had been doing to kidnapped humans shocked even the most hardened rebel soldiers. Tai-ho personally led the rescue mission, hoping against hope that he might find his sister among the survivors. What he found instead was a horror beyond imagination. Humans who had been genetically modified to serve as living computers, their minds enhanced but their personalities destroyed. "They turned them into machines," whispered Dr. Somin as she examined the victims. "Their bodies are human, but their minds have been completely restructured to process data like organic computers." Among the modified humans was a young woman who might once have been Tai-ho's sister. Her eyes showed no recognition when he spoke her name, only the cold calculation of a living calculator. The Valdori had not just enslaved her body, they had murdered her soul. The rescue of Proxima III became a turning point in human morale. The discovery of the breeding facilities and genetic modification programs convinced even the most moderate humans that peace with the Valdori Empire was impossible. This was not a war between equals, but a fight for the very right to exist as human beings. The liberation of Proxima III also brought the human alliance its greatest prize yet, the capture of High Admiral Zeftar himself. The Valdori commander had refused to evacuate when human forces surrounded the facility, choosing instead to make a desperate last stand. Zeftar's interrogation revealed the full scope of Valdori plans for humanity. Beyond simple slavery, the Empire intended to breed humans like cattle, modifying each generation to be more useful and less independent. The ultimate goal was to create a perfect servant race with human creativity, but without human will. "You cannot stop what has already begun," Zeftar told his human captors. "Even if you destroy every Valdori ship, even if you kill every one of my people, the modifications we have made to your species are irreversible. You will carry our mark for generations to come." Tejo looked at the alien who had overseen the torture of thousands of humans and felt only cold determination. "Then we will make sure no other species suffers as we have suffered. Your empire ends with us." The war entered its final phase as human fleets converged on the core systems of Valdori space. 3 years of fighting had transformed a species of slaves into a military force that the galaxy's greatest empire could not defeat. But the hardest battles still lay ahead. The Valdori homeworld was defended by their most powerful fleets and deadliest weapons. And somewhere in their deepest laboratories, alien scientists were working desperately to create a biological weapon that could destroy all human life in the galaxy. The servants who had become soldiers now faced their ultimate test. Could they not only win their freedom, but prevent their former masters from committing genocide and defeat? The final battle for Earth began as the largest space conflict in recorded history. High Regent Morden had assembled every remaining Valdori warship for one desperate gambit. If they could not keep humanity enslaved, they would destroy the human homeworld and send a message to any other species that might consider rebellion. General Tejo stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching as 1,000 Valdori vessels emerged from hyperspace around Earth. The enemy fleet was massive, but it was also the last military force the Empire could field. If the humans won this battle, the war would be over. "All ships, this is Admiral Sungmin," came the voice over the communication system. "Remember what we are fighting for, not just our freedom, but the freedom of every species that dreams of choosing its own path among the stars." The human fleet was smaller but more diverse than their enemies expected. Converted mining ships flew alongside captured Valdori cruisers. Industrial haulers had been turned into missile platforms. Even civilian vessels carried weapons cobbled together from industrial equipment and alien technology. But the humans' greatest advantage was not their ships or weapons. It was their understanding of the enemy they faced. 3 years of war had taught them that the Valdori, for all their power, were predictable. They followed ancient tactical doctrines and could not adapt when those doctrines failed. President Hyejin's voice reached every human ship in the fleet. "Today, we end 2 centuries of slavery. Today, we show the galaxy that no empire is too powerful to fall when its victims decide to fight back." The Valdori opened the battle with a massive energy barrage designed to destroy the human fleet in a single devastating strike. It was exactly what tactical genius Kang Min-ho had predicted they would do. The human ships scattered in patterns that looked random, but were actually carefully choreographed to minimize damage while drawing the enemy into a trap. As Valdori, ships pursued what they thought were fleeing humans. They found themselves in the middle of Earth's asteroid belt, which the human engineers had spent months converting into the largest minefield in galactic history. Thousands of mining charges, originally intended for breaking up space rocks, detonated simultaneously around the alien fleet. The explosions did not destroy many Valdori ships, but they created a cloud of debris that blocked sensors and communications. In the confusion, human attack squadrons struck from multiple directions using tactics no conventional military would have considered. Song Yu-jin led a group of converted construction mechs in a direct assault on a Valdori battlecruiser. The aliens had never imagined that humans would use industrial equipment as boarding craft, cutting through ship hulls with plasma torches and fighting in the corridors with tools designed for building, not warfare. "This is impossible," transmitted a Valdori captain as his ship was overrun by humans using mining gear as weapons. How did servants learn to fight like this? The answer was simple but profound. The Valdori had taught humans to work with whatever materials were available, to solve problems with limited resources, and to repair things that seemed beyond fixing. Those same skills, applied to warfare, made humanity incredibly dangerous. Admiral So-min commanded the medical ships that followed behind the main battle fleet. Her role was not just to treat wounded humans, but to deploy the biological weapon she had spent 3 years perfecting, a virus specifically designed to target the symbiotic organisms that gave Valdori their psychic powers. The virus did not kill, but it slowly degraded the crystal implants until they became useless. Valdori infected with the bioweapon gradually lost their ability to read minds, move objects with thought, or communicate through their psychic network. They became ordinary beings, forced to rely on their own intelligence and strength. Deploy the aerosol dispensers, So-min ordered as her ships moved through the battle zone. Let them learn what it feels like to be powerless. High Regent Mordun realized his fleet was losing when his own flagship was boarded by human fighters who seemed to know the ship's layout better than his own crew. The rebels moved through service passages and maintenance shafts that the Valdori had forgotten existed, striking at critical systems with precision that could only come from intimate knowledge of their technology. The human boarding party was led by engineer Oh-ji-won, who had spent 15 years maintaining Valdori command ships. She knew exactly where to plant explosives to disable the vessel without destroying it entirely. The goal was not to kill the enemy, but to capture their most advanced technology and turn it against the rest of their fleet. As his psychic abilities failed, and his ship fell to enemy control, Mordun finally understood what his empire had created in its centuries of oppression. By teaching humans to serve, they had taught them to learn. By forcing them to adapt, they had made them resourceful. By treating them as expendable, they had made them fearless. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked Taeho when the human general arrived on the bridge to accept his surrender. 200 years, Taeho replied. "Every generation of humans has added to our knowledge and our anger. You taught us patience by forcing us to wait for our chance. You taught us cunning by making us hide our intelligence. You taught us to hate by taking everything we loved. The battle for Earth ended not with the destruction of the Valdori fleet, but with its complete capture. Ship after ship surrendered as their crews lost their psychic powers and found themselves outfought by enemies they had never taken seriously. But the victory was tainted by a final horror. In the depths of the Valdori flagship, human soldiers discovered a laboratory containing a doomsday weapon, a genetically engineered plague designed to kill every human in the galaxy, including those who had been modified by Valdori science. They would rather commit genocide than accept defeat, So-min said as she examined the biological weapon. This virus would have killed every human being in known space within 6 months. Taeho stared at the containers of death that had been mere hours away from deployment. If the battle had lasted any longer, if the Valdori had been slightly more successful in their defense, humanity would have won the war only to face extinction from an invisible enemy. The discovery of the genocide weapon changed everything. Human forces throughout the galaxy, upon learning what the Valdori had planned, abandoned any thought of mercy or negotiation. The empire that had been willing to exterminate an entire species to maintain its power deserved no consideration in its defeat. Within weeks, the last Valdori strongholds fell to human assault forces. The empire that had dominated a quarter of the galaxy for over a millennium collapsed in a matter of months, brought down by the people it had considered too insignificant to matter. But the humans did not become the monsters their former masters had been. President Heejin's government, established in the ruins of the Valdori capital, offered citizenship and protection to any alien species that chose to join the new galactic alliance based on equality rather than conquest. Even the Valdori themselves, stripped of their psychic powers and facing extinction, were offered a chance at redemption. Refugee camps were established for alien civilians, protected by the same human soldiers who had destroyed their military forces. "We will not repeat your mistakes," Tejo told the captured High Regent during their final meeting. "We learned what oppression feels like, and we will make sure no other species suffers as we suffered." Morden looked at his former servant with something that might have been respect. "What will you do with us?" "You will live. But you will live as equals, not masters," Tejo replied. "Your people can earn their place in the new galaxy through their actions, not their birth. Some may choose to help us repair the damage your empire caused. Others may prefer to find new worlds where they can start over. That choice is yours to make." The war that began with human servants maintaining alien machines ended with humans, rebuilding galactic civilization on principles of freedom and cooperation. The species that had been dismissed as simple laborers became the founders of an alliance that would eventually span thousands of worlds. Years later, as he watched human ships departing for distant stars to bring liberation to species still suffering under alien oppression, Tejo often thought about the moment when everything changed. It had not been a single event, but the gradual realization that servants who were taught to fix things could also learn to break them, and more importantly, could learn to build something better from the wreckage. The Valdori had called humans servants, expecting them to remain forever grateful for the privilege of serving. Instead, they had created an enemy more dangerous than any military force, a species that remembered what freedom felt like and was willing to fight for the right to choose their own destiny. In the end, the Empire's greatest weakness had been its greatest strength, the arrogance that made them believe they could never be defeated by the people they ruled. That same arrogance blinded them to the truth that their servants had learned from 2 centuries of observation, that all empires eventually fall when their victims decide that freedom is worth any price. The servants had become liberators, the oppressed had become heroes, and the galaxy would never again underestimate the power of beings who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for.